For the ones that have looked at the news and also watched the news, as you probably know, is that in 2022, we actually embarked on a cost transformation program to save about 2.5 billion because our cost ratio was too high as a bank, which means your operations are either too complex or are involving too many people. So what we really wanted to do is to understand how can we simplify, how can we create a better, you could say, working operating model throughout the bank. And so that for us was the first inciting incident, or you could say the call to action, because what then also happened is that we as HR or as the people function also were embarking and taking this inciting incident as a way of saying, okay, so that also means that we need to also transform as a function, and we need to be able to enable this transformation to go through. So there were three strategic priorities here. So one was to really restructure the investment bank. So I just want to quickly give you the angle of the business, to also then look at relocating some of the capital, in this case, that we would have, that would go to different business divisions. And as I already said, also to accelerate the cost transformation. As HR, we then wanted to really see, okay, if we do this, what is our, you could say, our contribution to making this happen? As I said, we really wanted to look at, okay, so how big is in this case the HR function? How do we right-size it? But not right-sizing it from only an efficiency and effectiveness point of view or angle, but also from an experience point of view. And I will go into that a little bit later. So what was this call to action? As I already said, the challenge was to look at, okay, our HR operating model. How do we make sure that we create one that is employee-centric, that is efficient and effective, but also has the employee experience at heart? To do so, we wanted to set up, in this case, agile teams, which were cross-functional. We called them impact teams, that would look at, on one hand, the experience that was the starting point, you could say, but then also looking at what is creating this experience. So the organization that creates that experience, how is it set up? And how can we make it more efficient, and how can we make it more effective? With the goal to, of course, lower costs, but also to create a better employee experience going forward. I actually had the opportunity to go to the HR Exco, which is our HRMT, and ask them to take into account that we could do this from an employee experience point of view when it comes to that transformation. They agreed, and to do so, we also needed to make sure that they were at the right home. So the teams that I started setting up were also part of the cost transformation and the employee experience organization. What was the result? And I first want to show you the result, because I think the result speaks for itself. And then from that, I can then show you what was the approach and how did we go about this. So the result was, on one hand, understanding the experience layer. So how did our employees, and with that I also include line managers, experience the products, the services, and the interactions that we as HR were giving them currently. And then from that, we then also started mapping out the organization that's underneath. So which teams are responsible for that? What is the tech stack that we're currently using? What are the policies, and what are the, you could say, the content and the assets that are connected to that? Because only when you start understanding that, you know where to, in this case, take the right measures. So we mapped out the experience by doing about 270 interviews. We also had, in this case, some data coming from about 10% of our company that we surveyed solely on employee experience. And also we took the operational data to start making really sense of the story behind that experience. We converted that into insights through affinity mapping and through some other methodologies to triangulation of data, not to forget, to really get robust insights and points of view. And by doing that, we actually uncovered about 1,200 pain points through 5 focus areas within the operating model. That was then converted into problem and opportunity statements so that we would really understand, okay, so what are these problems that we need to really take forward? But also, what is the opportunity for us? Is it an efficiency? Is it a simplification? Is it a digitalization? Really to understand that. And then from that, we then said, okay, let's now also prioritize which ones will give us the biggest wins. And with that, I mean, because we understood what the experience was of our people, and we understood the moments that matter are nothing else than either a moment that makes or breaks an experience. It creates customer loyalty or it creates customer disengagement. Because we had that data, we were also able to understand that, okay, if we take this moment that matters, that has this huge disproportionate effect on this overall employee experience, then let's take that and see if we can change it quite quickly. So to really make a bucket of quick wins, but also to see, okay, where do we need more work? Where can we set it up in a more strategic way? Where do we need to redesign some of these experiences? So that was the experience layer. Then the other thing was really about, like I already said, is understanding how we as HR were basically set up to deliver that experience. Often what you see with transformations, especially when it comes to efficiency and effectiveness, we take the spreadsheet, we start looking at the org design, and then we start looking at, okay, so how can we streamline this? What we really did differently here is that we took the experience layer as a start, and then from the prioritization, we then started looking into our HR function and basically started to understand the different scenarios that through the eyes of our employees and line managers to then understand where we could, for example, simplify some of these processes, where we had to change content, where we had to do some changes in the org design. So through that, we were actually also informing the transformation of our HR function going forward, and basically right-sizing there where it matters, not only from an org design point of view, but definitely also from an experience point of view going forward. We mapped out, in this case, 26 scenarios. And what I mean with that, just to give you an idea, is we looked at, for example, initiating a talent review. Who are all the HR teams that are involved into that? Where do we have our biggest pain points now from a line manager point of view? If you take the line manager scenario, where do we have simplification? Where do we have automation opportunities? How quickly can we do this? Is this a quick win, or does it need to have investment to do some strategic improvements? So really looking at it from that point of view, building that portfolio of solutions, and then implementing them going along. Now, you need people for that, and to be able to do that, right? So I showed you the result. So how did we start? Well, we started first and foremost by building these teams. And for that, I needed to have the right people, which meant that we needed to, on one hand, of course, after understanding the purpose, we needed to select the right people. So the way that we did this is they were nominated, in this case, by our HR Exco, and then I had some conversations with them to really look at, okay, do they actually meet the criteria that I had in mind, which is about, do they have an innovation mindset? Are they able to understand that failure can be something that you can embrace and that you need to embrace if you want to move forward and innovate in a quicker pace? Are they inclined to look at data as opposed to the assumptions that they often make, or the experience or the expertise that they bring into the field? So are they really keen on making decisions based on data analysis and interpretation, and do they want to get stuck into that? I'm not only talking about quantitative data here, I'm definitely also talking about qualitative data. And then the other two things that you can see here is that it wasn't you could say a must, but it would be a preference if they would have had agile project experience and exposure, because we had these 5 focus areas. So I'll give you a couple of examples. We had recruitment, we had all the talent management processes, but we also had the service delivery organization. So everything from line manager and employee, whenever they have a query or they need a service coming from HR, we also looked and mapped that out in how they were experiencing that. To be able to quickly make strides into that, and to quickly make improvements, we really needed to also work in sprints, because I wanted to really make sure that we would show the value quite quickly to the business and to all the different stakeholders. So that's why definitely that was a criteria. And then last but not least is, are you able to develop a T profile, right? So are you able to talk to different or adjacent fields from HR, but also fields that are different? So are you able to talk to IT, marketing? Are you willing to get stuck in? Are you willing to understand their language, their way of thinking, so that you can actually bridge your work and your projects towards their ways of doing things? And then with that, you start getting that shared understanding. So really, we needed to have the right people. And then we also needed to have the right setup and composition. So the teams that we set up were 5 to 7, quite common for people that have been working agile for quite a long time. We really needed to make sure that there was one project manager and one, in this case, sometimes deputy. And I needed to have also a process re-engineering specialist into those teams, because not only I wanted to understand the experience from that high level, and then being able to drill down, I also wanted to really understand, in this case, what are the processes that are creating that experience. So we would go basically from different levels and understanding those different levels to really make, you could say, well-informed decisions about automation, simplification, or even sometimes also winding down some of the teams or bringing responsibilities into one team, and then looking at what other teams could do to really make sure that the accountability and the ownership was clear. We worked also with a flexible pool. So basically the project managers were in a flexible pool. They were reporting into me. They're still reporting into me. And we would then basically limit one of those teams with people that understood how to create better content, because we needed to have those skills. People that understand the processes from their expertise point of view. So, and that's why, SMEs were really also important to be part of that. And then also the subject matter experts. It was a conscious decision to have project managers not being part of that. So to give you an idea, the people that were leading this team, that was looking at it, was mapping it, they weren't a subject matter expert, or they weren't often working into the focus area. So advisory services, it was not somebody who was actually either worked there or had been exposed to that. The reason for that was I needed people to look at these kinds of things with fresh eyes. And so, although with best intentions, if you put somebody in there who has been part of that system, they will not ask the questions that you would normally ask when you go into that, quite brand new. So that was one of the things that was really important. And you can see here some of the focus areas that we took on board and that we took forward. So if I then give you basically quickly a summary of I think which is different from what I often see within my peers when it comes to leading employee experience. Although I've been introduced, I just want to highlight one of the other things. The reason why I chose to start working for the bank when they approached me is because I think they're quite forward thinking when it comes to employee experience, because I was sitting within HR, but I also had a dotted line towards IT. And my paycheck is paid by, in this case, half IT, half also HR. And I had close also, of course, relations and stakeholder management connections with facility. And with that, you have basically the three main drivers of the employee experience ecosystem. Because you have the building, you have the digital, so you have the physical, the digital, and then also, of course, you have the human. So the line managers was then also, of course, brought into that, so I could make sure that I also talk to learning. The reason why I'm saying that is because often my peers, they stop at, in this case, experience layer. So I understand now what the pain points are. I understand what the needs are. I also understand what the actions are that our users are going through in such a journey. If you want to talk about journeys, the problem there is that once we have that understanding and those pain points, we then have to go and basically you could say sell some of these improvement opportunities within the larger business. What we did is we looked at it from end to end in terms of the experience. But then what we also looked at is the service to core. And that's what I've been saying now in the presentation a couple of times, which is about understanding how is the organization set up and how are they delivering these experiences. so that you can take well-informed decisions to say, okay, we need to stop this, we need to automate this, etc., etc. So you basically really look through the lens of experience then to understand the delivery of your organization. The way that I often say is basically you set the stage, right? So the employee experience is basically built on the front stage. So within HR, that's your, you could say your HR business partners. But within IT, it can be also your service agents. So the service delivery organization is definitely also part of the front stage. And they create an experience, as you would do also within a theater. So I often use the analogy of a theater, right? So they create that. But what we've often, I wouldn't say forget, but what we often overlook is the fact that that theater and the fact that that front stage can perform in the way that they should be performing to create these really great experiences is actually also made up by the backstage and behind the scenes. So the backstage is all the, for example, content specialists that are helping to create the right experience that is being conveyed by, in this case, the HRBP. Or if you want to take IT, the developers that are building different applications, so that when the service agents are talking to the end user, that they know exactly what applications are in the make, what kind of improvements are built, those kinds of things. And then last but not least, behind the scenes is basically also your policies, the documents, basically the framework in which the backstage and the front stage is working to deliver that employee experience. So if you want to improve employee experience, and I'm really, really, really adamant about that, is it needs to also have a focus. You need to have a focus on the backstage. So how did we do that? And we did that in you could say 6 months. I already talked to you about the empathize phase. That's about understanding the experience. Then you build your point of view. So what are your biggest problems? What are your biggest issues from an experience point of view? And then we really went into understanding the delivery organization. So understanding the processes, understanding the service models, understanding the organizational design of these different focus areas. To then be able to say, okay, we understand now what the experiences are not performing in the right way. We now understand where that comes from within the organization. So how do we then, make sure that we ideate and that we find the solutions? As I already said, automation, org design changes, simplification, etc. And then from that, we would build MVPs and start testing and implementing that at scale once we would have learned from it. So very agile, but this is the way, quickly, high level, how we approached it and how we went about it. Now, the service to core, mapping out the delivery, we did that also in a different way. Because what you could do is you could basically start looking at the org design. But what we wanted to do, as I already said, is I wanted to bring together experience and delivery, or experience and service to core, as we would call it, to be able then to really make the right recommendations towards also, as I mentioned, to change the HR operating model in a sustainable way. So this is quickly an example of what we did. We used service blueprinting to really understand and bring the experience level and the delivery level together. And the way that you do that is through scenarios. I already said we had 26 scenarios. This is just a quick snippet of one of those scenarios where you basically start mapping out very quickly, in this case, for a line manager, how to initiate a talent review. And then you build that out and understand what are these touch points. So is it an intranet or is it an email, all kinds of other things. You also want to make sure that you understand the process. What are, in this case, the policies, the rules? What are the pain points? Everything comes into that scenario so that you can take, again, the right decisions. So you paint a picture, and then after that, you capture the insights. As I said, what really helps there too is you basically are able to understand why do we downstream have some issues. Are they happening downstream or are they actually happening more upstream? And do we need to make changes there as opposed to thinking that we can actually solve the symptom downstream? So you really, because you look at the end-to-end and basically are driving the transformation through that end-to-end view, you're able to actually change things sustainably and fix the right things. So it's really important, or has shown very important for the teams to use this kind of methodology, so that they were able to really see, okay, wait, there are critical moments here, and there are inefficiencies here within the backstage. Let's solve it. Or upstream, we need to do something about this or that. So that work all accumulated, in this case, in a line manager and employee view. And as I said, often those views have 4 or 5 swim lanes: the action, the needs, the pain points, also the emotional curve you could have. What we said is, yes, that's all good, and we definitely want to include that, but not all of it, right? So let's start with, okay, so what are the needs of our employees / line managers? What are their biggest pain points? But then let's also start mapping out, if you take a look at it from a journey view, for example, in the applying phase, what are the products and services that we as HR are delivering in that experience? What is the technology that's behind that? What are these moments that matter? So really, really also bringing in the organization and the way that the organization is set up. And through that, again, as I keep on saying, making the right decisions and really driving the right improvements by at the end of the day, having in mind that we need to create business value. So, conclusion. One is to set up employee experience, and this is from my view, so I really would like to hear from the audience if they have a different view. But to set up employee experience for success, you need a couple of organizational levers. One, you need to have its home needs to be the right one. So it needs to be in a transformation or in a strategy setup. Doesn't have to be necessarily, for me, HR, can be also IT or facility management, but it needs to be able within that strategy and transformation to bridge over across and to work cross-functionally, because that's the only way to get really an end-to-end view. And also the governance, it needs to be very close and inform, in this case, the transformation through data, but also as it's informing through data, building up empathy, also should have a joint, you could say, decision-making, or not decision-making, prioritization in terms of being able to take the right things forward. And then the last thing is, you need to build the right capabilities. What I'm seeing happening a lot now, because I'm now the 3rd time in my role as building up an employee experience organization, is that often we are seeing that, employee experience, we can do that within the old system, or we can do that within the old capability. So what I did is, I went, of course, onto ChatGPT and asked them, what are employee experience capabilities? And I got this, which I was thinking, yeah, it's a good start, very good start. But then the question is, are these really the capabilities you need to have to proper EX? And I would argue that if you take a look at the tools that we're using, and then also the capabilities that are behind there, you would also need to have some of these other things to be able to drive real sustainable transformation, which is organizational design. You need to understand AI so that you can make the right decisions on automation. You need to understand service management, the marketing, and also stakeholder management. But again, I'm going to give the floor to the audience in a bit, and then I'd love to hear also if you have other ideas. And that was it. So please, do you have any questions for me? I would be more than happy to answer them.
Well, thanks a lot, Martijn. I assume there are a lot of questions. However, we will keep them for the round tables. Afterwards, for the think tank, through the think tank on the platform. Yes. Okay. So we go. Thank you. Thanks a lot, Martijn. So we can discuss further on the think tank platform.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you all.